Welcome back to Call Her Daring. On today's episode, I am talking to Tanya, who identifies as a regretful mother. Tanya submitted her story to me a few months ago, and I read it on my Regretful Parents series on TikTok. In her message, she details how much she loves her children, but how the act of motherhood has completely erased everything she was before they existed. Today, Tanya and I talk about the circumstances in which she became a mother, how the reality of motherhood compares to her expectations prior to having kids, why she feels regret, and what advice she would give women considering motherhood. If you're interested in listening to Tanya's original message, you can find it on my personal TikTok page, that's at Kelly Daring, and it's part 9 in the Regretful Parents series. Tanya, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I know. Me too, actually. You are my first Regretful Mom interview, and so I'm a little nervous too. So that makes 2 of us, but...
Oh, good. Then we'll just be besties by the end of this.
Exactly. I have been looking forward to this conversation because I read your Regretful Mom message on TikTok. It's part 9 on TikTok. And the moment that I read your message to myself, when I received your message, I immediately knew that I wanted to share it because it was so well written. It's beautifully written. It's beautifully expressed. And you really touched on the change that happens when you go from being nobody's mom to a mother. So again, I'm really excited for this conversation. To start, can you tell me your age and how many kids you have and their ages?
Yeah, I'm almost 37. I have 2 kids. They are currently 4 and 2.
Can you tell me about how you became a mother and what your reasons were for having children?
I don't think I thought about that question hard enough. I was very like my dad will still say to this day, I didn't think you were going to have kids. And I didn't think I was going to have kids. So I was kind of 50-50. And then I met my husband, and my husband was like 100,000 billion% I would like to have kids. And I was like, okay, well, I'm 50-50. So I guess that just knocks me over the fence. Like I could take it or leave it. But I like you and you seem keen. So let's go for it. And like, to be fair, my husband is probably the greatest dad ever. And he definitely should be a dad. Like that's a great role for him.
That's nice to hear. Not
But
everybody says that.
yeah, I don't think I'm a bad mom. I just struggle with the role. It's just a lot.
It looks like a lot, yes. I'm child-free. I do have 3 stepdaughters, but I have observed moms with their kids since I was a teenager, as I've talked about on TikTok, and it looks very difficult to me. So I agree. Okay, so your husband definitely wanted kids. You fell in love with him. You were on the fence, and so that just kind of pushed you over the edge. And so what were your feelings about children before you got pregnant? Did you like kids, or were you just kind of ambivalent? What were your thoughts on kids in general?
I think I thought of kids like I've never seen kids as like a global term of like, oh, I like kids, or it's like I like that kid.
Yeah.
So I found there were some children that I just like melted my heart and I absolutely loved with, or fell in love with. Globally, like children as a banner statement, I'd be like, no thanks.
Yeah.
There were the ones that I had, like my friend has 2 daughters, and I would, lay on railroad tracks for those kids. Like I just love them so much. So yeah, and I was really banking hard on, because I was pretty open about questioning having kids. Like, oh, I don't know, and the reinforcement you get globally is like, oh, you'd be such a great mom, or oh, it's different when they're, because I was like, well, I don't really like kids, and they'd be like, oh, well, it's different when they're your own kids. And then you have these connections with these other kids, you're like, oh, well, it's probably kind of like that, where they're going to be my best friend or whatever.
Totally, yes. The response of it's different when they're your own, I feel, is said in pretty much every situation when any woman expresses any sort of doubt that she wants to be a mother. I feel like it's different when they're your own is like the go-to, that, and you'll regret it. And that's so frustrating because, yeah, the world is telling you It's different when they're your own. And you look at your friends' kids and you look at, maybe your sister's kids or your brother's kids or whoever, and you think, yeah, I love those kids. Those kids are freaking amazing. And maybe it will be different when they're my own. And then when they are your own, tell me about that. What's the difference?
My two kids I've had just really different experiences with, and I would say one, I love both my kids, but definitely one kid challenges me, and the other kid is probably kind of like how I feel or felt around my friends' kids, where I'm like, oh my God, these kids are so sweet, they're so cute, they're so whatever. I have one kid that's really straightforward or simple for me, and then I have one kid that is really challenging for me. And both of my kids strongly prefer their dad, which like I can't even blame them. He's just like he's a great guy, so I'm like, yeah, checks out. Like I would prefer him too. Um and so I have not felt that like bestie behavior with my kids. So when people are like, "Oh, it's different when it's your own kid," it's like, well, yes, because there is like a biological tether. Like when my first kid was born, I remember looking at him like laying there sleeping in the bassinet, and I was just like, "Oh my God, you will never not exist. Like it doesn't matter what happens from this moment, you will always have existed. You will always be a person. So if you die, my whole world will implode. If you get taken or you go away, I will not think about you every single day. Like there's that. So that I would
Yeah.
say is different when it's your own kid, because I obviously don't think about my girlfriend's kids in that same with that same gravity. I think like on their birthday, oh yeah, I should call up little,
Yep.
you know. But with your own kid, there is that is definitely different. And that is actually part of like the cautionary tale that I would go back and tell myself is like, hey, on top of all of the logistics, like the overwhelm and the day-to-day and the identity erasure and all that, there's also the anxiety of these people that you care so much about living in the world and susceptible to just as much injury and trauma as any other person in the world. And you can't, like, you could pack them in pillows and they'd still not necessarily be safe. Like,
Yeah.
you can't protect them from things. And just the potentiality of what could happen to these people, I find I can't think about it too much, or I get really buried by what the and I've watched too much true crime, which probably
That doesn't help.
doesn't help. Um, so yeah, it's like I guess the biggest reason that I am grateful that you have a platform like this and you're talking about this is just that I think I wish I would just had some different conversations before I had kids. If I had someone saying like if I was like, yeah, I'm just not sure about kids, and someone said to me, don't do it until you're sure, I think that would have sat differently with me than it's different when they're your own.
Okay.
Or,
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone say don't have, the regret it thing. I know that's popular response. I didn't have that one. I had a lot of it's different when it's your own. And after you have the baby and you look that baby in the eyes, your whole world shifts, like your priorities change, blah blah blah. I also did not have that experience, but I was also told that one quite a few times. Like everything just changes after you look at that baby. And that was not my that was not my experience. I mean, other than the thing I told you where I looked at him and went, oh shit, this
Right.
this is a big deal. Um, and I was, now I am so invested in your mortality,
Right.
which is scary because I don't have any autonomy on your mortality. That's
Yeah.
messed up. I
So
don't like that at all because I would rather die than my kids die. Obviously, I think
of
that's
course.
everybody, but
Of course.
yeah, but I don't have any control. Like they could get into like motocross or something when they're older, or decide they like skydiving, and I just have to sit there and like be okay with it because that's their
Yeah.
life and they get to choose that. But I hate it.
I
Like,
know. So it sounds like the mental weight and like that mental anxiety is something that you have experienced as a mom that you weren't prepared for. That nobody said like your brain is going to change and you're going to look at these little people and you're going to worry about them constantly.
yeah,
Is that accurate? Like is that You weren't expecting that? You weren't prepared for that?
No, not even remotely. Like I knew people worried about their kids. I didn't understand to the visceral level
Yeah.
that it's there and that you have to just manage it because you can't. I don't think it's a fair life for them to live where they feel like someone is looming over them, buffering every moment. And I do believe in like healthy risky play and all that stuff. Like you do have to like they have to live. And I don't know, you just pray they don't like motorcycles. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you do? Like,
And football and skydiving and
yeah,
whatever
I'm
else.
like, you can
Yeah.
go break bones, that's fine, but just like don't die.
Call Her Daring is sponsored by Bagnet Company. I founded Bagnet Company in 2015, and since then, I've made it my mission to create useful accessories that not only make your life easier, they add a little sparkle to your everyday. The best pleasures in life are the little things that you love using because they bring a smile to your face and serve a purpose. That's why Bagnet Company is a no-brainer for women who know they deserve to have it all. Easier, better, more beautiful. It's not a tagline, it's a life mantra. So talk to me about feelings of regret because, like, what does that mean to you? What does your regret entail exactly?
I'm exploring, and my eldest has inspired this exploration. I have this suspicion that my eldest might be neurodivergent, and we're still confirming that because it's really early. But I'm observing, and as I have looked into it for him, I am noticing some red flags for me, and I'm like, well, this is possible that this is something. Again, it's all TBD. But I would say, because so many women, especially in our age group, are underdiagnosed or not diagnosed, and the way it presents shows up so differently that it's easier for us to slip under the radar.
Yeah.
I would definitely also validate someone going in to check if they might have like triggers in that regard, like sensory overload and that kind of a thing.
Okay.
I think that's relevant even if you're not neurodivergent, but I just think neurodivergent people would be more sensitive. So some of my regrets are essentially noticing, I guess, how I prefer or how I would choose to live my life. Like I'm a little bit rigid and particular, and I am definitely more comfortable and happy in a space where I have more autonomy, more freedom, more independence, and I get to kind of do things in a way that I want to. And with kids, that's gone essentially. Like there's so much surrender. And oh, the thing I hear so often is like, well, duh, like that's what's having kids is. And it's, I guess for some people that's really obvious, but that wasn't one of the ones I logged or clocked before I had kids. I didn't think, oh, right, I'm going to have to completely, like, I won't have anything for myself. Or it was one of the things I said, like, well, I'm worried I won't have anything for myself. Oh, no, you figure it out. Like, again, people just like undermine like all of
Oh, yeah.
the things that happen. So I think it's when I really am craving freedom that I will regret, like, or just like the choice, like when I'm like, oh, I just really want to do this, or I want to, yeah, when I want to go do something that's, I have to jump through so many hoops. Like even to get here today, I told you like, oh, I didn't realize my one son's care provider was closed, so now I have to figure out how to care for him so I can do this. And sometimes just managing those logistics makes it hard for me to do anything that I want to do because it can be really overwhelming. If it would be simpler, I guess, if they both went to the same place at the same time and everything was the same, but that's just not how it works. So that's the other joke I make with people is like, okay, just have one then.
Yeah, I know.
I do feel like one kid would be a lot. It's a lot more straightforward, certainly.
Yeah.
Like you can
It's
kind of like,
There's only
yeah,
one of you to take care of as opposed to two or three or five.
yes,
Although My next regretful parent interview is with a mom who has 5 children. And for her, and people, one of the most common comments on her video is, why did you have 5? Why would you keep going when you felt regret? And I've talked to her, and she has said, and she will say in this interview, once she had one, it did not matter. Like whether she had 1 or 3 or 10, she was already a mother and nothing would change that. And so for her,
Mm,
there was no difference between 1 and the 5 she has.
right.
So it's interesting, but I can see how someone might think, no, 1 would be easier than 2, which is easier than 3. I could see the logic behind both of those things.
Well, this would be I will say this then because I validate that obviously each person's mindset, I guess, around motherhood and what we regret or what we are having challenges with is probably a little bit different. So maybe with her, it was like, just like, oh, okay, I'm a mother now. And therefore, that phase or those options of maidenhood or whatever you want to call it is now closed. So I'm mother. I may as well just jump in with 2 feet, but it doesn't mean I don't miss maidenhood.
Right.
For me, because I want freedom, I feel like I could have a lot more freedom with 1.
With 1.
Yeah. But there's been a lot of joy in 2 because my kids are so different. And my eldest and I don't want to say we butt heads, but I think we're both neurodivergent. And so when
Okay.
we like things done a certain way, each of us, we struggled to find cohesion.
Yeah.
And my youngest is very laid back. And so I have, with my first one, I feel like I missed out on these experiences that mom would talk about, like of bonding with her kid or certain things. And I'm just like, what? And then with my second kid, I was like, oh, this is what they were talking about.
Interesting.
Because I didn't have those with my first kid. So yeah, there is no one experience for motherhood for sure.
No.
Everyone's going to have like a unique, I just, the biggest thing, I want to convey is just that if you are having hesitations, it's legitimate. If you choose child free, do it. Like, it's just that should not be gaslit by society. So there are so many people, and I know I'm in a rare situation where I have a very supportive partner who sees when I'm struggling and is like, hey, and he takes the initiative. Like last night, my kids were out of the house. And I get like, he makes sure he sees me and he supports the space that I need, and he's a very hands-on parent. So that would be the other cautionary tale I'd say to someone else is like, pick your partner wisely, because you
Yeah.
also might have different ideas of what expectations are once the kid arrives. Are you going to be the dominant or primary parent with just a little bit of support? Are you guys going in kind of 50-50? Is it all hands on deck? Is there, how are you distributing jobs? Because my husband still works full time, but he doesn't come home and think, oh, I'm going to sit on the couch while you make dinner and tend to the kids. Like, that's not
Right.
how we run our household.
Was that something you discussed before you had kids? Were you both clear on what you expected from the other in parenthood?
Oh gosh, okay, let me just rewind. All of my brain has been eroded in the last 4 years. There's also, no one can prepare you for the sleep deprivation also.
Oh, I
I think
believe
it
it.
has affected my brain, and I'm not joking. I'm trying to remember if we had actual conversations around it. I know that it was, I feel like if we didn't verbally talk about it, it was definitely unspoken as far as like, but the agreement was there. Like I knew him to, like, I knew he was going to be a hands-on dad.
Okay.
I knew he was a diaper changer. Like, you know what I mean? There was not going to be any weird misogyny undertones in that regard. And he is, like, on weekends when he's home, like, I don't do diapers. It's
Oh,
like,
wow. That's wonderful. I
yeah,
love
well, my argument is, I'm like, do you know how many of those I changed through the week? Like, I could have the weekend. I mean, obviously that's like within reason. It's not a hard no. It's
it.
just that
Sure.
he's the go-to guy on the weekends.
On the
I'm like,
weekends.
that's your job.
Yeah, that's
Um,
wonderful.
I housed them and fed them with my whole body, and he didn't do any of
Exactly.
that.
Yes,
Diapers is a
exactly.
small job comparatively. But yeah, no, he's just he's great, but that's not the the norm, I would say. Like in any mom group I've ever been in, the stories that I have seen about people's partners, I'm just like, praise the Lord for my.
Yeah, no kidding. So it sounds like you didn't really discuss it, but you just knew. You knew who your partner was, and so you knew
Yeah.
who he was going to be as a dad.
We had aligning values is what I would say
Yeah.
in that regard. And my husband also grew up in a home where his dad was very hands-on. Like his parents were very balanced. Like his mom went away sometimes, like, and his dad encouraged her to go away. Like I think he had a little bit of a leg up in that regard. And then my upbringing was like a little bit more dysfunctional, but not but still healthy dysfunctional. Like my parents were divorced growing up, but they were very communicative and very healthy divorced people. Like they never said bad things about each other. Like they were like really, really good. So I think between those two dynamics, we just that was an aligning value. Was, yeah, everybody shows up, and it's both parents are important essentially.
It's so cool that he is such a wonderful father and so active with the kids because often you've probably noticed on my TikTok videos about regretful parents, one of the go-to responses is, this sounds like you're a regretful wife, not a regretful mom. And so people love to pin it on the husband or the partner that's not active, that's not changing diapers, that's not there for dinner time and bath time. He's out on the golf course. You know, the point is like you chose badly, and you don't regret your kids, you regret your husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your story because you are proof that you can have the most active, wonderful partner and father to your kids and still experience regret.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could certainly see the regretting your partner compounding
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
the issue. I have actually really, I don't know that I would have survived, and I know that this sounds very hyperbolic, but I don't know if I would have survived motherhood without my partner. And I mean that quite literally, just because I struggled with postpartum depression very intensely with my first, and arguably it like has lingered. Like I guess you can have postpartum depression for 7 years or whatever.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, is it just depression? Like, I don't know. But so I don't know how I would have lived if I didn't have a person who was there for me in the way my husband has been. I'm very grateful for him.
When did you start to feel feelings of regret? Was it some people have experienced it prior to their children even being born. They felt regret even when they were pregnant, and then some when their child was born, and then some not until a little bit later. When did you really start to feel any feelings of regret?
I was pregnant.
When you were pregnant. Okay.
But I still had a lot of the delulu of people being like, "Oh, but when you see their face."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I struggled. The pregnancy was really hard for me because I have a history with eating disorder. So I really struggled even just to adapt to my body shifting in shape, and so there was a lot of body dysmorphia. Like I felt like I'm like I don't even look pregnant. I just look overweight. I felt that for like until I was very, very, very pregnant. I was like, I just look chubby. And
Right.
I know that that's not very 2024 of me, but that I did struggle with that. So I did not bond, with the pregnancy and whatever. And it's so weird because I did do all the things on paper. Like if people, could say a lot of things, but I'm like, man, I was doing yoga, I was meditating, I was doing visualization, I did hypnobirthing, I did I had a
Wow.
midwife. I did every, and I wanted to like being pregnant. Like when I was little, I was like, I think if I was ever pregnant, I think I would like it. Oh no, I hated it. But yeah. So and then I just trusted the process. I was like, okay, but I'm gonna see this baby. It's gonna, and I really tried. I like really tried to connect and bond while I was pregnant. I did think like from a science experiment point of view, I did enjoy like the thing moving in there. I know that creeps some people out. I thought that was so cool. I still think
Yeah.
it's cool. How there's like a person in there and you just have this like thin piece of tissue separating. I just think that's wild.
It is wild. I agree.
But the concept of mother though was still like, I don't know. And then he came. The birth was unreal, like great, fantastic.
Oh, wow.
That is probably my that's my like little tether that I hold on to as far as because living with regret in motherhood is really hard, right? Because it's you have to
Yeah.
you're in cognitive dissonance because you can regret it, but you're there. So you do have to make peace with it as often as you can, otherwise you'll go bananas.
Yeah.
So something I hold on to is birthing my first son was one of the coolest, most empowering, most amazing experiences I have ever had in my entire life.
Cool.
And there is nothing that comes close to that experience. Funny
Because of
enough,
what your body was able to do.
yeah, the whole thing was like, I don't know how to explain it. The whole thing was magic. Like it was just
Cool.
amazing. We had a home birth for both of our kids. But even the birth of my second kid was nothing compared to the birth of my first kid was just wild. It was so cool. But definitely I did not see him and go, "Oh my God, look at this exquisite creature." I had there's a video of me saying like, "Well, you're kind of funny looking, but I guess we will have a good working relationship until we, develop this into something more." I,
I
I
love
just
it.
I thought he was kind of squishy. I asked the midwife about him too. I was like, this is normal? This is what they look like? This is She's like, "Yep." I was like, "All right." I didn't have a lot of experience with infants and newborns, so
Hmm.
anyways, it's kind of funny, but and people don't like it when I talk candidly about a baby like that because they're like,
Really?
"Oh, what a this poor infant was not loved." I'm like, "Listen, his dad had enough love for like seven people. This kid is loved, trust me." And then yes, mine was a little bit more practical, a little bit more functional, but I still did all the things. I snuggled him and I
Yeah.
breastfed him and I did all the things you're supposed to do. But yes, it was probably with a little less enthusiasm than some.
Well, it irks me
Um,
to no end that it's expected that there's one experience of motherhood. And if you don't express that that was your experience, then there's something wrong with you. It pisses me off to no end. Like, no, every single birth experience can be different for the mother. It's not a one size fits all thing. So, yeah, it really, I hate hearing that you were expected to have this one type of experience, and if you voiced that you didn't, then it was somehow less acceptable. That irritates me.
I
Sorry.
No, I agree. It's it's hard to hear, I guess. Like I have I am lucky to have grown up with the parents I did because I have what I feel is a pretty good, I don't know whether it's thick skin or whatever, but people can say what they say and I'm like, "Well, I guess you just don't get it." It's really
Yeah, that's
that's
kind of
my
my attitude
mindset
too.
is I'm
It
like,
still pisses me off.
you didn't have that experience, so it's hard for you to understand is what I'm hearing when you're judging me.
Right. Yeah.
um that's fine. I can live with you being uncomfortable with my honesty.
With my experience, yes.
Yeah, but that was sort of the comedic immediate response from that little baby. Because I remember I was waiting for it. I was looking at him like, okay, here's it. Here's the moment. We're supposed to click in. And I was like, no clicking. You're kind of funny
Oh,
looking.
yep.
But I was really high after that birth. Like it was like, I don't know if you've ever done like a half marathon or a marathon or anything, but that
Nope.
was the equivalent of running. I've only done a half, but like that was the
Very
equivalent. I
cool.
was like, except for like times 40, like it was cool.
Yeah, it's like a high. Very
Yeah.
cool.
But flip side of that coin, just to be clear, there's also people that have the exact opposite experience that I did. I had a great experience in birth, and a lot of people have the very dramatic opposite of that. So,
Yes, very traumatic.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, you talk about losing your freedom and your autonomy, and you talk about this intense biological tether it's a lot of mental it's a lot of mental work. It's a lot of mental weight. How do those two things affect your daily life? So, how is your daily life different now when you've got these two, this lack of freedom, this lack of autonomy, and then all this mental weight, how does that affect your day and your life? Like, I think in your message, you talked about like you're wearing sweatpants and you just don't have the energy or the focus to do the things you want to do. Like, what's that kind of stuff like as a result of the freedom and the mental weight?
It ends up being this almost like feedback loop because I'll talk about the mental weight part first. I really, really get anxiety planning or booking appointments or anything like work or, whatever, because I'm like, okay, I got to get childcare. And then what if the childcare falls through? Or what if one of my kids gets sick? Then what's my backup plan? And is this. So I really, really struggle to book work specifically because I don't want to not show up or cancel or whatever. So I was a performing musician prior to having kids. I really struggle to book gigs essentially. And I struggle to book gigs not because I can't. I mean, it's a labor, but and that in and of itself is actually another thing on the mental load is there's not as much room for me to do stuff. So maybe I don't have the energy to go and hustle or book gigs or book shows or reach out to people or do those things. But let's pretend I did.
Okay.
Then I have to be I have to make sure my kids have care. My husband has a job where he's kind of on call and he can get called out to work at any time. So I could, plan that gig on a day where he's supposed to be home, but if he gets called out, he's got to go. And then what do we do with our kids? And then what if we can't find care? And I don't feel like in the past, I have never not showed up for a gig. I have never, ever, not once have I ever canceled. So I don't even know that that's an option. Maybe it is just to not show up, but then you're not going to get hired again. And then what if that happens more than once? And I have a lot of what ifs here. Okay. So obviously Tanya is living in the room of anxiety. So perhaps this is a personal block. Like I've really considered this as maybe this is a personal problem and I am just perceiving all of these potential things that could happen and it's stopping me. But that in and of itself is a form of reality. Mm-hmm. So that sits there. It's just it doesn't feel easeful. It doesn't feel like I can just plan something and do it. It's got to be planned, but also backup planned. And, I've had, care and then it falls through. And I just find that to be the most stressful. It feels like one of those dreams that you're in where just, stuff's happening. Those dreams where they're just so anxiety inducing.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reality when things are falling through. Like, I did have someone bail on me last minute for childcare and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it got resolved. And that's what I mean by, I'm like, maybe this is a personal thing. You have to get out of your head about it. But it's something I have to manage that I didn't used to. And I really struggle with it. And again, maybe that's just me and my personal struggle, but I do really struggle with that.
Okay.
And then, there was a second half. Oh, the overwhelm on the day to day. The way we approach our parenting or the way I approach parenting is, I just, by default, because of the age of my kids, they're quite small. I don't expect them to listen to me this is going to be really hard to explain. And so like, if I'm like, hey, we need to get our shoes on, I don't expect that they're just going to like run and put their shoes on. That's not the reality. So instead I have the reality is like, I'm probably going to need to be next to you. So you were putting your shoes on. Even if you're doing it yourself, you just probably need that like little bit of external pressure or support to like absolutely get your shoes on. So in the mornings, it kind of like compounds your routine to there's one person, two people, three people that I have to get ready in the mornings. And if there is resistance, and often there is, around getting ready, it just really squeezes down the time that there's left for me because I'm going to get deprioritized. Like the one person that because I know I can get my shoes on, but I might not get out of my pajamas. Like I've done a lot of drop-offs in pajamas because there's just like, and I don't eat and there's no coffee. There's nothing. There's just like, let's just get these people out the door.
Yeah.
And then on the mornings where we don't have somewhere to go, because I actually do find getting out the door to be wildly challenging and kind of exhausting just in and of itself. So say we don't have somewhere to go, I feel like I have a little collapse. Like in the mornings, I'm like, oh, like I just want to sit and drink my coffee
Yeah.
and I just want to eat breakfast. And because these happen so in what I mean, literal, if we're talking about breakfast, bites, like bite-sized moments of I get a couple bites in, then I have to go do something. I get a couple sips of coffee in, then I have to do something. It delays the morning, and then all of a sudden I'm making lunch, and now I'm
Yeah.
still in pajamas, I'm still in sweatpants. The morning doesn't start, and then people could say, okay, we'll get up before your kids, and I'm like, you get up before my kids.
No, I want to sleep.
Like, I just, some days I can get up before my kids, but some days my kids are up really early and
Yeah.
that's just not an option. And I find that's another thing that makes it hard to have routine. And I want to go for a walk. Like, I want to feel like I'm moving my body and being physically fit. But now my kids are at an age, again, lots of opinions and lots of like, so where I could maybe once use the stroller, my 2-year-old, like once they start getting in that like moving phase and they can explore, they don't want to sit. And that
Yeah.
includes in a stroller. So you can't just like go out for a nice morning walk and like burn off some steam because it's not going to be a nice walk. It's maybe, again, maybe if you have the right kid, it is for some people. My first kid, I actually, the first year that he was born, we went out every morning for a walk. That was a great part of our day. But again, as soon as he was approaching 2, I couldn't do that anymore because he wanted flexibility, he wanted freedom, he wanted to get out
Sure.
and move. And then I had a newborn coming or was there around that time anyways. So, yeah, anyways, it just makes it really hard. I have a hard time. And as someone who is like, I'm really thrive in routine and structure, and to have that sort of thrown out the window
Yeah.
because it doesn't, just because I thrive in routine and structure, my kids may or may not. And to an extent, of course, there's like structure, but rigidity. I thrive in rigidity, and
Okay.
I don't think they do. And to be a parent for them, I have to forego my preference
Yep.
in my opinion, I have to forego my preference to show up for them in the way that they deserve, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like your days are a series of moments just kind of pieced together in which you are never really able to prioritize your wants, your needs. And it makes sense because you have to prioritize your children's first. And so you come last pretty much every moment of every day. And that can be exhausting. And that's something that I think many women don't understand, that their life is going to change in that way, that will be their new reality.
And it's funny because I think I said that too, and someone said, "Oh, you figure it out." And again, it's like, but
Well,
in
you are figuring it
hindsight,
out. You have figured it out, but that doesn't mean you love doing it. That doesn't mean you're happy. It doesn't mean you're content. It doesn't mean you're satisfied. Yes, you're doing it. Technically, you're checking the boxes, but I mean, you figured it out, but it's not, it doesn't always feel good.
yes, and I think that's the part. And maybe I was just naive. I think I was actually naive about a lot of things, and not having any real experience with infants. Like, I didn't have siblings. Like, my sibling is 6 years younger than me. He does not have kids. I just didn't have any babies around me. So I was really trusting people when I was saying, hey, here are my concerns. And very few people validated those concerns. Most people were like, oh, you figure it out, or oh, it's so different when they're your own. Like, we've went through the tropes already, right? But like, I guess I just wish I had had more conversations with people that went, that is a legitimate concern, or like, yes, that's a reality, or yeah, it's hard. Just someone to say something where I could have then not gaslit myself about the experience. There
Yeah.
was just so much I went into it going. So even I think one of your questions at one point was like, what did you expect from motherhood versus what you got? And
Yep.
I feel like my expectations and what I got are very similar.
Oh,
The problem was how much I trusted the people saying what that my expectations were incorrect.
yeah, wow.
And I think that there's definitely been some experiences that are different, as far as like I wasn't expecting the amount of overwhelm. Like again, people were like, oh, you can still work and do motherhood or whatever, and some people can. I really struggle with it. Like I really struggle because of like basically everything I told you about making appointments feels so hard for
Right.
me with a husband that's on call so I don't even have scheduled hours where I know my partner's going to be home to watch kids. So he could be gone for 3 days. And so and this happened lots actually where I've had work scheduled and then he's like, "Oh, I got to go out." And so then I am scrambling to find care, and just the workload of that alone feels like a job. And
Yeah, absolutely.
it just compounds everything. So I would actually love to hear from moms who just work like a job. I'd be like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you do it when your kids are sick? Where do they go? Because the day homes and the daycares won't take them if they
Yep.
have, a snotty nose, which is about 98% of the time.
I know. No kidding.
They're so gross.
Yeah, they're like little petri dishes.
And I thought I was going to be, I used to look at snotty nosed kids and be like, oh, that's so gross. Like, if I had a kid, I would never have a kid with, yeah, both of my kids have very
Yeah,
snotty noses all the time. It's disgusting.
constantly. Yes.
Yeah. But, those are the funny moments too when you're like, you're such a better parent when you don't have kids.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh, you think you're going to do it perfect. But I think what you just said is so impactful about I wondering what your expectations were before parenthood, and you actually think your expectations were on target, and it's the other parents, it's the moms in your life who led you to believe that your expectations were off base. That's so interesting to me. So do you think they did it on purpose, or do you think that it's just not their reality?
I think it's not their reality, but this is me expecting, I think most people are good people. It's two things. I think, I don't know. So TBD, let's circle back in 20 years. But like a lot of the people that are telling me this too are quite a bit older than me. So they had
Okay.
like more adult children. And I think when you have adult children or older children, you romanticize that
Hmm.
early life of your kids because you remember that and they are so cute. Oh man, they're
Sure.
just like, you could just want to squish them. Um, they're just also so intense. Like there are, the realities of the job is it is still very laborious, but it doesn't cancel out that they are so cute and they're so,
Adorable.
yeah, they're lovely little people.
Hmm.
But I think maybe the further away you get, you kind of are like, oh, I miss when my kid was squishy and cute like that. I miss when we'd snuggle. I miss when, they used to say that word that certain way. Like there is a magic to kids being young and little.
Absolutely.
And I think when they're your own kid and you've had, maybe 20 years to like get to know your own kid, of course you're going to look back and go, oh man, I wish you were that little again. I loved you that little. But I think you end up because the human memory is such an unreliable thing.
Yeah.
And I think you take those present feelings of the 20 years that you've compounded to love that kid and you apply it to that little person.
Hmm.
But like my son when he was born was a stranger as far as I'm concerned. Like he was foreign to me.
Hmm.
And the more I get to know him, certainly the more I love him. And sure, when I look at him now, I can like take the love that I have for him now and I can apply it to that memory of him as an infant. But it's not what I felt initially.
Okay.
It was something I developed. So I think that those people that said those things, it's in good faith. I do
Mhm.
believe. I don't think anyone's trying to dupe us into motherhood. I mean, I don't think so. Maybe if you go way up the patriarchy, sure. But most people, I think they are just like having nostalgia for their own children that are grown-ups, that they look at them and they go, oh, remember when you were little and cute? And then they want to be like, oh, do that. And so maybe when my kids are 20, I'll be like, oh, I get it. I get why people, because in at that 20-year span, probably this phase I'm in now is going to appear or seem so small.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's even why I not hesitate to talk about regretful parenting. Well, there's lots of reasons to hesitate on talking about regretful parenting, but one of them is I'm like, I'm not done yet. So should I even be talking about this yet? Like, I feel like I need to come, I shouldn't be able to talk about regretful parenting until maybe 20 or 30 years has passed, because then I have a fuller picture to speak on.
Yeah.
And so that's something I guess I think would be awesome for you too, is like if you can find an older demographic to talk to about regretful parenting, just to see how long. I'm curious how long that goes. But certainly there are realities that if you are averse to, like if you were thinking, I'm not sure about having kids because of this, that's just what I would want to validate, is going, those are real and valid concerns. And, how much of your life are you donating to the cause? Because like, I'm quite certain that I'm donating 20 years
Yeah.
until they're kind of like, and obviously I'll still be a part of their life and important and all that stuff, but there will be maybe even 15 years if you go, like if they get a lot of independence in that teenage era. But the work just gets different.
Yes, it changes.
I also wonder if I might be a better older kid mom. It's another working theory, which again we'll have to come back to this if you, but is kind of going like, I wonder if there's just some moms that really struggle with early years, but maybe we're better in the teen years, because you hear the flip a lot. You hear people going like, oh, teenagers, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I could vibe with a teenager. I
Yeah.
feel like I could have a conversation, and I feel like a lot of teenagers kind of just need to be heard and held space for their feelings, which are valid, and probably, yes, a little extra because of hormones and various other factors going on. But I mean, women of all people should understand hormone fluctuations.
Yeah, no kidding. Yes, I think you're right. I think many women do feel that the younger years are much more difficult than the teenage years. And there are women that feel the opposite. But so many women say, just wait until they get a little bit older. It gets easier. It gets better. There's so many women that say that. So I do think that's true. But I also think that it's okay to acknowledge your regret now in the moment, rather than just waiting 20 or 30 years to look back and say, okay, I don't regret or I do regret. I think that because if you do that, you are going to romanticize the past.
Yeah.
The bad parts are going to fall away. The day in, day out struggles that you're experiencing now will fade away over time, and you'll forget. And so that makes it difficult to acknowledge that regret 20 years down the road. And so in a way, you're kind of not being true to yourself, to your experiences and your feelings, by only looking at them from 20 years down the road. Mm-hmm. Oh, you said you think you're going to be the possibly you're going to enjoy the older years more, and I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe I'll still hate it. I don't know. This is,
I
again,
know.
these are the threads that keep me going. Like,
Yes,
okay, remember how
there's hope.
birth was awesome. Okay, and this could get better later, so let's just hold on.
Exactly. Hey, you do what you got to do. Get
Oh,
through it all.
absolutely. It's certainly a survival. I guess that's the part that I feel, if I'm gonna be like, have a pity party for myself, that's the pity party I have, is I'm like, what a way to live though, to just be surviving it. Like, I've just always had this philosophy. And again, maybe it's been naive, maybe I'm stupid, but I have just always had this belief that we're like, I'm an empowered person, and I'm the creator of my life, and I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be regretful. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be resentful. I don't want to live as this person. And it's like so frustrating that I have to, like, that I feel like I'm actually in a situation where I don't know, like, there is no out, right? Like, when I looked at him, there is no way out. And only slightly exaggerating when I say I have looked at every way out of this, and the only way out is my death, because I can't leave him. I will think about him every day. I will, and sorry, this is me going off the first kid. It's both of them, obviously, but I can't leave. I will probably then become some sort of like, alcoholic addict, something, right? There'll be some sort of whatever. I can't, like, I'm not going to adopt them out. Obviously, that's silly, right? Because my husband, but like, just again, whatever. Come with me on this journey, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
you can't, put them in another home, because again, you're just going to be tormented thinking about them all the time, because that biological tether is real. And then, they can't die. That's not on the table at all. Like, I will just die. I will implode. And so, like, the only way out, the only way to actual freedom is for me to die. And I really just can't do that to my husband. Like, I just, he likes me. He's a really nice guy, but he likes me too, even though I'm not as likable. Yeah, I just, there's no way out of it. And so it's weird to live in this, like, okay, there's no way out of it. So yeah, then you gotta, cowgirl up, I guess. Like, I don't know. And then this is, I guess, me trying to figure out how to create and live in joy when a lot of my environment is working against that.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a great point. I think it is the only thing in life that you cannot change. You cannot go back and undo it. You can't pivot. You can't go down another road. Once you are a mother, you are a mother. There is no changing that. And that is terrifying.
It is literally, I think, the only decision you can't undo.
Exactly.
In life. Like, you can even remove a tattoo. You can get a divorce. Like, there's so many things that, yes, they're permanent, but they're not. That is one that is permanent. And it doesn't matter how you do it, even if you are someone who miscarries or someone who terminates a pregnancy, or how, like, that is not, it's just still there. It's always there. You're even, and this is not me, I'm making obviously no attempt to guilt people around certain choices. This is just me going, but it's there. It's a reality. It's a part of this, that motherhood is not, it is like the only thing that is absolutely fixed, permanent. I think even fatherhood is a little bit escapable. Not for every guy maybe, but there's definitely more options around it. Motherhood is like
less judgment.
Well, yeah, which is wild.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is true.
Could go off on a little feminist tangent there.
Yeah, I know. I think you may have answered this, but I'm going to ask anyway. So if you could give any advice to young women who are not mothers, who are thinking about whether or not they want to become mothers, what would your advice be?
To validate, if you have a feeling, if you are intuiting something around motherhood, if you are hesitating, that is valid. Like,
Okay.
period, full stop. If you choose to be child-free, valid, full stop. No questions. And if you're, like, if you are not, it is, isn't that on the Eat, Pray, Love movie? Like, it's like getting a tattoo on your face. Like, just, if you are not fully committed, don't do it. It's just, and that's the thing. I think I would probably just go and smack myself upside the head. Like, no, you don't have a baby, because you're kind of like, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. And then you're like, well, this guy's great, so sure, I guess I'll have a baby. No,
might as well.
what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I thought you were a smart person, and now I'm just not so sure. So I just, because I think also, even if you have a lot of conviction around having children, and I do believe some people really are meant to be mothers and destined to be mothers, and I
agree.
Are just supposed to have kids. If you know that, oh man, do it. Like, because on those hard days, that's the thread I wish I had to grip to, was why I chose this. And the why I chose this is stupid, so I can't use that as a thread. I have to make other threads to connect for myself, to hold on to on hard days. And the privilege of having a partner who really cares about me to hear me when I say I'm like, I'm having a bad day, and him going, okay, I'm coming home. I've got this. I'll do it all. You just go sit in your room. You go, like, he's just, yeah. Anyways, I'm lucky, and I know I am.
I'm so glad you have a great partner. Yeah.
Me too.
When your kids are older, how honest will you be about your experience in motherhood? Will you protect them by not telling them about your regret, or will you protect them by sharing your feelings in an effort to help guide them through intentional choices?
This question has haunted me since you told me about it originally. So I think I will have an answer for that in 15 years or so.
Yeah.
I think what I will emphasize is essentially just making sure they're sure. And so, like, the problem is I'm such a bad liar. So if my kids ask me point blank, like a question point blank, I can't lie. I think I have tact, and I think I can be diplomatic, but I can't lie. So if they ask me point blank a question, I'll probably have to answer it. But there are still honest answers I can make that I don't think are,
Hurtful.
yeah, like, do you regret being a mom? Like, that would be like a no, but yes. Like, there's, like, to them, I don't know. It depends on how old they are too, actually. If they
Yeah.
ask me these questions, how old are they? What's the age appropriate answer? Like, how much are you going to understand the nuance of my answer?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of parenthood that I certainly appreciate. I think personally I'm a better person now after having kids. I think I this was the only way for me to become this person, was through having kids. I wouldn't have got here without my kids. I don't think everybody's that way. I don't think you need to have kids to be a better person or anything. But I just think that was the way I learned certain things. Like, I am more patient. I'm more compassionate. I have a lot more room for understanding experiences I haven't had. Like, there's just a lot more space. I have a better understanding of myself because I didn't realize I had these needs until they were taken from me and
Hmm.
going, oh, okay, here's, so I think it depends on what age they ask me certain questions. But if they're at the age where they're considering having children, it would basically be me emphasizing, make sure you're sure, and without fear mongering, because that's the other thing I think people can do too. I had a lot of fear mongering around birth, which I think actually amplified why it was so awesome. I was like, take that, suckers.
Yeah. That was
My birth
amazing.
was awesome. So, like, when you tell people you're having a home birth, the look on most people's faces is not very supportive. But yeah, I think it would depend on. It'll be a nuanced answer, but to be honest with you, and essentially, if my rambling has not conveyed that already, I don't have an answer yet. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I think I'm really going to have to lean into the moment. I'm going to lean into my intuition. I'm going to lean into how they're asking me the question, why they're asking me the question. But I also, I can't lie. I don't lie to my kids
Hmm.
even now, which is sometimes to my detriment. The park is not closed today. Like, I don't lie to them about stuff. I can't. I don't want them. I just feel like kids are so smart, and even if they buy the lie in the minute, maybe in a year they go, "Hey, actually,
Yeah.
wait." And I feel like those create cracks, and I want my kids to know that when I tell them something, it's legit. And even if it
Yeah.
takes me 10 years to build that, to know that I'm not going to tell them something that's not true, I don't care. I want that.
I love that.
So the park is not closed today, and no, you
I
can't
just
get
don't
a
want to
donut
go.
today, and it has nothing to do with anything other than we're not going today. Like, which just does mean I eat a lot of temper tantrums. There's a lot of, but anyways, that's the cost, I guess.
Yeah, but at least you're honest and that's honorable. I think
I,
that's an important
yeah,
thing.
it's my noble journey.
Yeah. I saw on your Instagram that you recently, very recently, wrote an article on matrescence. Am I saying that correct?
You are.
Okay. So I was unfamiliar with that term and I was wondering if you could tell me about it and why you wrote the article.
Okay, first of all, I'm honored you creeped me.
Of course.
Second of all, um, yeah, Oh, that reminds me. I have to work on an article here. Okay, thank you for that reminder. Oh my god. Okay. So matrescence is, if I was better prepared, I could give you better.
I know, I sprung it
It's
on you.
yeah, it's not fresh in my brain right
Sorry.
now, but it was a term coined by I think a psychologist, and essentially, but it's essentially like adolescence, but for the mother. So going from like maidenhood to motherhood and the transition of becoming a mother. And I think that in my opinion is not like that's valid to anyone that has biologically given birth, but also anyone that's adopted a child or anything. And honestly, I think it actually can translate personally. Again, this is just my opinion, but I think it can translate across any age range. That was actually one thing I thought of when I was holding my son and how foreign he felt to me was I was like, man, like there's no difference in adoption versus birthing a child biologically for how unfamiliar he felt. Like as in it just to me it just really some people said, oh, you can't love like an adopted kid like you love a biological kid. Like I call BS on that. I would say no, you absolutely can love them the same. But anyway, sorry, digression. But essentially, matrescence is that transition from maidenhood to motherhood, and all the wiggly stuff in between, and it can include like identity erasure, like a lack of self, like not feeling like you know who you are, because you're kind of between roles. And that's a really oversimplified way to put it. And it's a lot like adolescence in that you're kind of discovering. So I think adolescence is the gap between someone being themselves and separating from their family. So they're kind of like, when we're little, it's like we are like, my son is my son, but in the context of his family. Well, who is he outside of his family? Who is he beyond his family? And so then that's that adolescence is that figuring out who am I alone as a person, as a sovereign being, who am I? And then you have to do a lot of unwinding to figure out, my parents' opinions, are those a reflection of my own opinions? Do I have different opinions? And then that's where we can also, of course, get a lot of like mussed up feelings because so the teenager has to rebel, has to peel away and like push away everything to see what still fits. And I think that the matrescence thing is a very similar concept. Except for I think it's almost the opposite, that a lot of us are clinging to the maidenhood. We're like, no, I don't want to let that go. I want that. I liked that. I liked her. I loved her. She was great. And I think another thing that has really helped me was grieving the loss of myself, like grieving who I was, grieving the dreams I had, grieving the experiences I wanted that I either won't have or they won't look the same. Like even just the traveling that I wanted to do. My husband and I planned to have our first child, but he came very quickly. Like people were like, oh, it's going to take a minute kind of a thing. And he was like, I was off birth control for 2 weeks and he was there. Like
Oh my God.
but my husband and I were kind of like low key planning to travel to Thailand, 4 months down the road kind of a thing. But our son came so fast. It was like, oh, okay, well, we're not doing that.
Wow.
So we'll probably still get to Thailand, but it's not going to look the way that it would have the first time or in that, so when people say, oh, you can still do that. Yeah, but it's going to look different.
Yeah.
I've digressed again. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. I can really get out of hand.
You're all good. This is great. I love it.
But I do think that matrescence, I really wish it was a little bit more widely acknowledged.
I was just
Because
going to say, why aren't we talking about this more? This should be talked about by every mother, the change that they go through from being a non-mother to a mother. Like, why aren't we talking about this all the time? Because it's such a huge shift. It's huge.
Even mothers willing, like, so because this does not just apply to regretful mothers, like even willing mothers going into there's still a loss. Like you're still letting stuff go. You're still taking on new stuff. Your role shifts, like the balance, if you will, shifts. Like we talk a lot about balance in motherhood and like things change. And and then layer on that, of course, the hormone shifts and fluctuations, the body shifts and fluctuations. And again, that can be kind of like, you can take adolescence and compare a lot of that, because there's a lot of those heavy changes physically happening in the adolescent body. And so this is a form of adolescence in a way. And then I think probably another conversation that needs to be had around women is like, we need like talk about menopause, because that's another big transition. And again, it's like a releasing and then taking on a new role. I think I'll again cross that bridge when I get there, but one crisis at a time here.
Yeah. Pace yourself.
But I do wish it was a little bit more commonly known, because I think it could be, it could just really contextualize a lot of our experiences, which would then make them a little less alarming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope to do that with this podcast and continue to do that with my TikTok channel, is to bring these things to light, keep talking about them, so that women, again, like go into motherhood intentionally and they know what they're getting into and they're not surprised and their feelings are validated. Because in the case of your story, you kind of knew what you were getting into, but your feelings weren't validated. That's really not helpful for anyone.
For me, it's a theme I've noticed, and this is like a slight separation from the topic. So this might just be my like little like, you know, seed of wisdom for just any woman, but I have allowed myself to be, you know, low-key gaslit, like kind of my whole life. Essentially, I would had a feeling around something and then I spoke to it, or, you know, went to put it into action, and someone went, "Oh, I don't think so though." And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, you're older or more experienced or whatever." And I relinquished my feeling like, "Oh, okay, well, I thought this, but you say this, so I'll listen to you." And that's just been a theme I've noticed in my own life. And so that's my number one thing I like to, when I get an audience of women, that's the one thing I like to say is like, trust yourself. Like, your thoughts and feelings and intuitions and instincts are valid and real, and take input, but don't erase your feeling because of that input. Like, just layer it all in. Go, okay, here's my feeling. Okay, someone said this, and then add that on instead of replacing.
I think that's such a great comment to end on. That was like beautifully stated. And I could not agree with you more. For some reason, well, not for some reason, there are systems in place that make us second guess ourselves constantly, that make us not trust ourselves. And we can't allow this to continue to happen. And we need to make a change, not only for ourselves, but for the next generations of women. They're going to have a much harder life, I think, with all that's going on in the world, and the least we can do is teach them to at least trust themselves. If they can't trust anyone else, they can trust themselves. So I think that was a beautiful note to end on.
Thanks. I feel I'm gonna have what's it called? I can already feel myself having anxiety and remorse about putting my foot in my mouth like 70,000 times through this conversation. So I'm going to live on that compliment, just so you know.
Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for joining me today. Talking to you has been invaluable, not only for me, but I know for the Call Her Daring listeners. And so I just can't thank you enough for sharing your story and your experience with us.
I'm so grateful that you've created a platform for this. So just thank you for doing that.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Call Her Daring podcast. You can find me and Call Her Daring on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Follow for even more content and conversations about women being radically honest about the female experience. Please join me here every week for a new episode of Call Her Daring, and let's continue the powerful tradition of storytelling with the goal of informing and educating us all, so that we may step into our truest selves and realize our full potential as powerful women.